Hello, everyone. Welcome to Feedstuffs 365. Meteorologist Greg Soulje is here with an early in the week look at the weather. And then tomorrow, just put this on your calendar.
Yes.
Greg's going to give us a longer term forecast as part of Feedstuffs 365, our usual live stream at 1 p.m. Central. So you want to mark that down, 1 p.m. Central, 2 p.m. Eastern. So make sure you tune in for that. But for now, let's get a quick look at what's going on out there, Greg. I know there's a lot of rain down in the southeast, and I think we're doing okay here with planting in the Midwest from what I can tell. Or what I've seen, but I'm sure you'll have an update.
Yes, we have some planting progress numbers, and just like we have talked about, you and I, and on the TV show and on radio, this range of planting conditions from and opportunities and completion from northwest to southeast across the Corn Belt. We'll get to that in just a second, but yeah, a lot of rain in the deep south and southeast, and there appears to be, I mean, we've been talking about, getting from progress to the D word equals what that is going to be in after we get out of the weather pattern. But I don't know. I think tomorrow we're going to talk and a little bit today. There is even more rain showing up here. And I think it's going to become a problem where, and Mike Pearson and I have talked about it, you and I might have as well, that I think we're going to get to a point, and we're maybe letting the cat out of the bag here, that there's going to be maybe some market influences because of weather, because of the need for, heaven forbid, replanting going on. I think we're seeing just a phenomenally wet pattern in those eastern Corn Belt locales again as we move through the conclusion of May and the beginning part of June. We'll have the details tomorrow. That's another reason to check in on the live stream at 1 o'clock Central Time. But we'll get you through a little quick update here on this Tuesday, the 13th of May. And here it is in highlight form. Ohio has little progress to report, and that's probably the I-70 corridor on southward. And I think you can just take I-70 and bring that southward where you're getting worsening numbers because of the rains of mid-April and beyond. And anyway, only 3% of the corn, 2% of the beans seeded as of May 11. Meanwhile, in the western Corn Belt areas, and primarily Nebraska, now Minnesota picking up the pace, and Iowa's in there as well. And kind of northern and central Illinois, southern and central Wisconsin are sort of right in the middle of the bad numbers southeast and the accelerated numbers west and northwest. Minnesota, 31% of their intended corn acreage is in as of May 11th. And I'm sure those kind of numbers are playing out in the rest of the western Corn Belt areas where they've been on the eastern cusp of some of this 95 to 100 degree heat. A lot of times we just make mere mention, and I think there's going to be growing talk about what's going on in the southern Canadian prairie. Winnipeg was up to 99 degrees over the weekend. And I know we're talking about the Corn Belt here, but 99 degrees in southern Canada and mid 90s in the Red River Valley of the North. And that's already an increasing dry, drought-ridden area. So, and then the switch in weather is going to be very dramatic, and we'll talk more of that here in a few minutes and in greater detail tomorrow. Meanwhile, across the plains, it's a range of conditions, and it's primarily still dryness and drought. Now, there are some significant rains coming in the next few weeks, we'll put it that way, but then it's like the spigot on, the spigot off. That's the way it's going to play out from northwest to southeast, just like we've been talking about here from the beginning part of the year. So wheat struggles in the northern plains. 46% of Nebraska's crop is rated poor and very poor. Nebraska also leading topsoil moisture shortages, followed by South Dakota, somewhere between 76 and 66% respectively. So the warmth has helped where there's been recent rain across parts of the Dakotas. Those pasture lands have greened up. They need moisture, and they are getting moisture in the northwestern end of the spring wheat areas of southern Canada. The S word is showing up there, and the F word is showing up there. And perhaps a build southward, I think, into some sections of the northern Corn Belt. I would think the end part of May, beginning part of June, there, and we'll let the kitty cat out of the bag on that one as well. So in any event, the southern states, way too much of a good thing. And we've seen a little byproduct to that, where these dew points have begun to jump quickly into parts of the central and southern Corn Belt. Fog areas of sporting into parts of Illinois and Missouri and southern Indiana. Big deal. Who cares? Except if you're trying to get around. But it is a trip off that moisture is beginning to evac or build northward, and those wet grounds in the Ohio Valley, the southern Corn Belt, and then down through Dixie will be a major contributing factor, I think, with time, with putting more moisture back in the air. 10 inches of rain, by the way, for the month of May. We're not even halfway through at Lafayette, Louisiana. Next week, the start of a heat wave weather pattern down across the deep south and southeastern states. So we've got cold air on the move. We've got the usual heat building south. Here we are in the mid latitudes, right in between. And I think a couple of fronts are going to get stuck in this west to east flow. They won't move. Disturbances tracking along it. And then you're just chasing, trying to dump the rain gauge every day and figure out when you can plant or keep an eye on those poorly drained areas. And the western states, just maybe a little more typical setup of some elevated fire conditions across Arizona, New Mexico because of dryness and drought. The snow is still coming on down. It's above about 65 to 100 to 7,000 feet. That's kind of low for mid-May. So indications, again, that there's more cold air on the move. There is the Tuesday maps and charts. We've had these what we call closed off lows that get cut off from the main steering currents, where the steering currents have been riding through the Pacific Northwest, the U-shape, the buckle, and the trough. They ride up into southern Canada. The air sinks coming off the Rockies, and then you have the general warming off the plains, and that's how you can come up with some of these record-setting highs into the southern Canadian Prairie and upper Midwest. Meanwhile, under the jet stream, what we call a cutoff low, it meanders, it warbles, it just moves on its own. Sometimes systems pull it back northwestward. We saw that kind of a retrogression, another word that we talk about. Yes, weather does back up from east to west in this latitude. It's typical again in the tropics, of course. And so you get these scattered showers, pardon me, a couple of thunderstorms, had some cold air funnels. Folks were kind of freaking out in central Illinois yesterday with reports of these cold air funnels. They're just circulating pockets of instability. They do not generate severe weather, not necessarily considered a tornado, but they are kind of cool funnel clouds nonetheless, and certainly brings it to your attention. But some of those showers are still in the eastern and southern Corn Belt. The rain, 6 to 10 inches in Georgia, 5 to 10 into parts of the Carolinas, moving up the eastern seaboard. Those are certainly drought busting. There's the Tuesday evening maps and charts, and still a system up aloft. You can see that low outside of the Chicagoland area. That's kind of the surface reflection it is of the low up aloft. And so, yeah, still dealing with some spotty shower activity. The humidity and the dew points creeping up in the past 60. That will help to lift the air and generate some moisture. Probably some fog areas, the Mississippi Valley on eastward tomorrow morning. Spotty to scattered showers in the eastern Corn Belt. Look at the moisture moving back in off the 90 to 95 degree heat out of Big Sky country. And boy, they have been all over creation. But the bottom line, they've been able to see their drought pattern ease and probably even significantly improve in some of those spring grain areas of central and eastern Montana. And by the time we get to tomorrow afternoon and evening time, the rains are on the northern plains. We're going to bust that heat wave weather pattern big time over the southern Canadian Prairie through the northern plains as well. Another day's worth of upper 80s to mid 90s in those same areas. The temperatures will crash tomorrow. Heads up, livestock managers, bin and barn operators, keeping track of those humidity and dew point values. And rain, too, which is welcome, and probably coming through some of the worst drought areas of South Dakota into the Red River Valley of the South on eastward with that particular weather system, and some pretty good soaking rains and gusty winds and a drop in temperatures still expected over the plains Thursday. Not a widespread severe weather outbreak. There may be some heavier storms, maybe in the parts of Nebraska, Iowa, the upper Mississippi Valley, and under what probably will be another closed off but moving low. I wouldn't be surprised that somewhere in the southern Canadian Prairie, there's a couple of wet snowflakes that come down with probably a more significant threat for some snowfall over the weekend in those same areas that dealt with 99 degree heat north of the U.S. border. There's the 48-hour rain forecast coming across the country, and then the highlights and headlines are shaping up like this. The heat wave will come to an end, a screeching halt through the plains, 1 to 3 inches of rain for the Dakotas. Nebraska, too, into that northwest Iowa, Corn Palace up probably from the Twins on north and westward, and a quick drop-off on at least the 48-hour fall forecast as it applies to the rest of the Corn Belt. And we will probably see some near 90-degree heat. For some, that'll be good. Others, but some of that may work as far north as Springfield, Champaign, Indianapolis. Would be Thursday, would be the hot day across the Corn Belt, and probably some 80s to follow. And then another cool-off slated for the weekend. There are the upper air winds and charts, and you can see the bending of the trough, the U in the west and southwest, another low coming across southern Canada up aloft. probably some snowflakes somewhere around Winnipeg come Friday morning and Saturday morning, probably north of Sault Ste. Marie. And then look at here, Sunday, Monday, another almost, well, it is an El Nino driven look to the weather maps that charts another low coming across the west upper loft, a very broad shape, U-shaped configuration of trough, if you will. And that system, again, lifts into the central and northern plains. Problem is when we extend those maps and charts on some of our in-house charts that we put together, we are able to see that trough hold and really lock down and stall out because of that load that you see in New England and southeastern Canada. About a week to 10 days ago, you might have heard the weather forecaster talking about an omega block, the Greek letter. There's a low here, there's a low here, and in between there's the hot ridge. Well, that ridge is going to establish itself over the southeast. The left part of the omega letter over the plains and western through northern Corn Belt areas, and then we'll kind of slowly propagate it east and stall it out. The other low, the eastern flank of the omega, out across areas of the western and northern Atlantic. So you see that's a lock, and we're here in mid to late to May, getting into June, and systems just don't move much. Jet stream winds normally back off, they wind down. So you watch the little jet streaks, the colder up aloft, convergence zones, rain outflow boundaries of one sort or another to trip these showers and thunderstorms off. So the mechanisms to make rain become less broad-based, but you still generate broad-based rains on the smaller mechanisms because they just, once you get these thunderstorms going, they're little atmospheric engines and they kind of run with a mind of their own. And sometimes they'll coalesce, sometimes they propagate, sometimes they put together these clusters, what we call mesoscale clusters. And that's the concern that we see here. They may ramp up in severe mode in the afternoon, then on the overnight, early morning hours, just mushroom out into what we call, these downpour producing, just convective rains that come through the areas east of where the severe weather's played out. So it's a problem that we're watching, and we'll have greater detail on that tomorrow. And the show's on This Week in Agribusiness. And you can see this low moving up through Canada over Friday and Saturday. It washes out. There's a north wind and, again, some snowflakes. There's probably a frost or freeze. Looks to be pretty good assessment of that through Winnipeg, north of Sault Ste. Marie, maybe the arrowhead of Minnesota. That's getting late for those folks into Monday. And then by Tuesday, this is the kind of the configuration we worry about, where you get lows that sit in the plains. You get an east-west frontal boundary across the Corn Belt. South of there, you get beat up with severe weather, southern plains, the southern Corn Belt. I know we're moving technically out of the severe weather season, but it's going to ramp up a little late in arriving, but I think we're going to ramp it up here across the plains and Corn Belt going forward over the next couple of weeks. And the rains, which will get going in these overrunning rains, thunderstorms out of the Dakotas, upper Midwest, Great Lakes areas, breaks in between, and probably more of the breaks if you get south of the warm front. And this is a range of daytime readings in the 60s by the time we get to Tuesday into the northern Great Lakes region, and south of that warm front through Oklahoma, eastern Kansas, Missouri, southern Illinois, 85 to 95 degree heat, and then probably some 95, maybe a local 100 heat developing across interior inland areas of the Gulf Coast going forward after Tuesday of next week. So you can see some of the heat developing through Texas over the weather hazards, if you will, over the next 5 to 7 days. Severe weather ramped up in a couple of areas. One through the southern Corn Belt. Would be surprised that should begin to lift northward, the severe weather threat mid to late next week. Heavy rainfall again over the same areas. There's a saying, wet grounds beget a wet weather pattern, and it works. Dry grounds beget a dry weather pattern. So you're locked into a drought. You can't get anything moisture-wise out of plant material, let alone pasture lands and soils. So you just kind of percolate there, and no means of getting more moisture back in. You have to advect it, but then those advecting winds of moisture are sucked up by the dry grounds. Meanwhile, you've got moisture in the atmosphere. You got wet grounds. You just add to the atmospheric moisture motion and movement of the atmosphere. So that's the story of the southern Corn Belt, and I think that's a potential that we got to keep an eye out for. Again, eastern Corn Belt, Wisconsin, Illinois, obviously, probably from about the Twins to Milwaukee to Grand Rapids, south to I-70, anywhere in that corridor, and points east and then southeast towards the Ohio River Valley going forward here for the next couple of weeks. Anyway, drought update, that's as of last week. We will make significant inroads, I think, in some of the drought areas, not end it, but maybe a categorical improvement in the drought mode over the plains, western and northern Corn Belt, and it's going to become an excess. Again, another example, in some areas you go from a drought to a flood probably something we need to keep an eye out for in parts of the Corn Belt going forward. There's the next 7 days. That's 4+ inches of rain for the southern Canadian Prairie, the Dakotas, moisture in the southern Corn Belt, central and southern plains. Those are probably going to be severe weather outbreaks where we get into a drier mode with time over the Gulf Coast. They need it coming off the big rains of the month of May, and wouldn't be surprised again. This is a snapshot that we just see slowly propagate east and south on these multi-inch rainfall totals on a given week across the heartland. We will leave you with this. This is the 6 to 10 day model, if you will, of the upper air. And a lot of times we like to use this, correct it, readjust where the troughs are. And that's another way that we do some forecasting around here. Just take whatever the model's kicking out and adjust it to our timing. So just to keep it simple and short here, there's a U-shaped bend over the high plains areas and along the divide. There's heat in the deep south. It's a southwest to northeast jet stream flow. That's usually an indicator of severe weather potential because the low-level winds are in from the south. So that's wind shear, directional shear. So it's a ripe setup here for not only the next 6 to 10 days, but very little change here moving forward through the end part of the month. We think there'll be a couple of fronts stuck in those middle lines. Disturbances will propagate along them. And so we are wet in many, probably at least eastern Corn Belt locales for the end of the month and probably the beginning part of June. There are signs if you look through the western states and you can see some of those red hatch areas and across the Pacific, that is probably the developing hot ridge that will impact the middle part of the country with dryness and drought going forward. But we got to get past for that to materialize west of the Mississippi, probably first week of June. And then it's the middle part of June, beginning to move into the eastern parts of the Corn Belt, assuming we have dry grounds left and there's something to grow out there. So not to be the gloom and doom guy, but I think it's one of these years going forward. I mean, we've made great progress, and then the poorly drained areas or what have you are just going to be too much to catch up with. And we're back into either replanting or calling it a year. And there will be a decent amount. I'm not in the markets. I couldn't even tell you an acreage standpoint, but there will be pockets that will need to either be replanted or just throw in the towel for the year. So we'll have more details on all this on our broadcast tomorrow. So that's at least the short term of it all here on a Tuesday.
Very good. Yeah, tomorrow at 1 p.m. Central, 2 p.m. Eastern. Yeah, as always, Greg, not much going on out there in the weather these days, is there?
Feet up on the desk. Where's my bike? I'm going for a ride.
There you go. Very good. We'll touch base with you tomorrow. We hope all of you tune in, and we thank all of you for tuning in today.